Welcome to the Top Listing Agent Show, the place to be to stay on the cutting edge of what it takes to sell more homes in less time. Each week, your host, Chadi Bazzi, will share with you the best skill sets, systems, and strategies so you can become a top listing agent. And now, let the show begin.
Hey everybody, Chadi Bazzi here, and welcome to another episode of the Top Listing Agent Show. Super duper excited because I have a guest today, and he doesn't know that I had his name on the list of people that I want on the show for approximately 2 years since the beginning of the show. We're finally here. I'm super excited. Mr. Greg Harrelson, how are you, buddy?
Man, I'm doing great, man. I'm excited. I love your energy. I love the energy of your show. So I'm excited to chat with you and contribute in any way I can, man.
I appreciate it, brother. And for the few people out there that don't know the name Greg Harrelson, can you give us a little overview, brief bio about you in like 30, 40 seconds or a minute or less?
Yeah, I'm kind of an OG in this business. I've been around here for, selling real estate, probably got licensed maybe 25 years ago. And I started just a real brief explanation or introduction. I started really as a prospector. I call it a telemarketer for my dad. And that actually went pretty well. The results of my calls gave him quite a few listings. And I figured out at that moment that, hey, maybe I have the ability to do this myself. I got into the business with my dad years and years ago. We started doing hundreds of transactions. I think we got up to 484 was the year before I founded my brokerage, which is a Century 21 franchise, and then started focusing on taking all the experiences that I had on building huge production based on listing focus, because I wasn't working with any buyers. It'd probably be like 90% listings, 10% buyers was the makeup of our business. Then I started, building a big team, opened up an office that was just made up of just my team members and focused on developing talent and teaching them on everything that I learned through the process. Wow. And here we are. So now the companies did just shy of 3,000 transactions last year, and we should hit around 3,800 this particular year. So having fun along the way.
Absolutely. Well, it sounds like a lot of fun and a lot of transactions and a lot of work. Is it a lot of work, Greg, or?
Well, work is a way to describe something that somebody does. So I don't think I work. But because when I wake up in the morning and go to the office, I feel like it's nothing more than I'm going to the tennis court. I mean, it's a game. And so if we're going to use the term work, I probably work way harder on the tennis court than I do in business. But remember, it's just a game. So do I work hard? Sure, I do. In everything I do, whether it's tennis, basketball, or whatever, I'm going to work a hard sweat.
And Greg, that's I love the response, and it's going to lead me to saying something that absolutely had an impact on me. I'd say approximately 20 years ago.
Yeah.
It's something that you said. It's something that you said about 20 years ago that I heard from you, and it sounds to me like you're a very disciplined person. And let me tell you exactly what you said. And I may, part of the quote might be just a couple of words off. And I'm telling you, it had a huge impact on me. It had a huge impact on my career. It had a huge impact on my success. It had a huge impact on who I've become. And I'll tell you, I've shared that with approximately hundreds of people, if not thousands of people all over the country. And it's something that you said.
All right.
I believe you were at a superstar retreat and you were on stage being interviewed. And one of the things that you said is if I go to work and I close 6 transactions in a day, I take 6 new listings in a day, and I open up 6 new deals in a day. But if I don't make my 60 contacts, it simply means I didn't go to work that day. Mm-hmm. And that to me was like 6 closed, 6 opened, 6 listings, and I didn't go to work that day, which described your discipline.
Yeah.
So I want to begin by saying, that again had a huge impact on me and thousands of people all over the country. Can you talk a little bit about that, your discipline and your work and all that good stuff?
Yeah, that's such a great conversation to have, So let's look at the 6 listings, the 6 closings, the 6 openings. See, all of that is a result of a process. That is not the process. So if I went to work today and I got those results, but I actually didn't do anything, meaning follow my process, then there will be a day in the future that I won't get those results. See, those were results from a day in the past that I followed the process. So every morning you got to wake up at 0. And remember, you wake up unemployed by default. You have no choice. You're going to wake up unemployed. That's just the way life is in our business. But it is a choice to determine, it is a choice whether or not you go to sleep unemployed. So I could wake up unemployed, cash a bunch of commission checks, but not generate anything new, and I'm going to go to sleep unemployed. And I just said, you can't do that. We cannot wake up and go to sleep unemployed. It's fair that we wake up, but we got to follow our process. We got to follow the process that leads us to the result. And that's really what I focused on. So my thought process was a day not prospected, especially at this time. A day not prospected was a day not worked. I could work 12 hours, but if I didn't do my prospecting, I couldn't count it as a day worked. That was our mindset, or my mindset.
I love it. I love it. How does one develop such a mindset, Greg? Because the mindset conversation to me seems like it never ends. You know, everybody's like, talking to these 30-year-olds, 40-year-olds, and 50-year-olds, and I'm like, damn, you've been around for 50 freaking damn years. When is the mindset conversation going to stop? When are you going to get it that there's a job to do no matter how you are feeling that day? Like, how does one develop that mindset of like, okay, I just got to go to work. I got to do my job.
A good question. And, I don't know that I have the answer, but let me just share with you some thoughts. I mean, I think people overcomplicate this mindset thing, right? I think that sometimes we start talking about mindset and we purposefully go so deep in the psychology of the mindset. And we purposefully do that because you're never going to be able to answer the damn question. It's an unanswerable. So we go deeper and deeper and deeper and try to find out why and try to find out this. And all of that is just a creative way for you to avoid getting up and doing what you're supposed to be doing. You just got to be able to connect the dots. The dots are simple. You do this and you get that, and you can have a terrible mindset in the process. Like, this is not necessarily a mindset. This is just like you do this and you get that. Now, if you have a positive mindset, then while you're doing this and getting that, you may enjoy the process a little bit better, but you could have a negative mindset, follow the process and get good results. So it's really not necessarily the mindset, it's you're being committed to connecting those two dots and understanding this causes this. It's a cause and effect. This is the cause and this is the effect. Do this, you get that. Now, if you want to layer the mindset on top of that and be positive and now say, well, this is not really work, this is a game. Yes, that's how I perceive it. Okay, so while I'm doing this and getting this, I'm probably having a lot more fun than somebody else that's sitting here saying, gosh, I got to go to work today and this is tough. Fine, have that attitude if you want to, but still get your stuff done. And anybody that's trying to get a result and they're trying to bypass working, they may get lucky. They may hit the lottery one or two times. They may get that lucky thing. And you may think that because it did work that one or two times, that's duplicatable. And I got news for you. It's not sustainable. Now, in today's world where the market's been so good, it feels like it's sustainable because you can just show up and luck out. And after a couple years of that, you start thinking that is a process. But as soon as the wind shifts from behind us and starts shifting to blowing in our face, you'll realize you got to get back to work. So my advice is go back to work before you're forced to go back to work. Get back into the grind now because the market will shift.
Absolutely. And I love how you threw in the word, commitment. Okay. Yeah. And it's like, everyone, if you ask somebody, the question is, are you committed to doing better? I mean, 100% of the time, what are they going to say? They're going to say, well, yes, I am committed to doing better. But what people really don't understand is commitment is not just a word that you throw out there. Commitment shows up in your discipline, you doing your job each and every single day, no matter what. And look, you and I both know, we run in the same circles. I know people that don't have the talent that we do, okay? But they have the commitment and they have the work ethic, and some of them are doing bigger and larger numbers than we are.
Yeah.
Okay. And I think that has a lot to do with, you know, people like literally connecting with their why, people like literally having a purpose, because if you really don't have a purpose, then you have an excuse to not wake up on time, not to show up, and not do, you know, their job. How does one tap into that purpose? How does one tap into their why? How does one activate that burning desire to get up every single day and go out there and dominate and be the best version of themselves?
Yeah.
In your opinion.
In my opinion, I think what we need to do is we need to ask ourselves a simple question multiple times. And the simple question is, you know, what is my goal and why do I want it? Okay, so my goal is 500 home sales. Why do I want it? Well, I want the money that comes with it. Well, why do you want the money that comes with it? Because I'd like to buy fancy things. Well, why do you want to buy fancy things? Because of this. And why is that? Well, because I actually want to feel like I'm accomplished. Okay, well, why do you give a shit about feeling like you're accomplished? Because, you know, when I grew up, I was told, you know, that I would probably never do anything, you know, I'd never be successful because I stunk in high school. Okay, so why is that important to you? Because I want to show my mom or my dad, you know, that they raised a good child. Well, why is that important to you? Like, keep asking why every single time. It's like peeling an onion, layer after layer after layer. Eventually you get to the core and you realize what your why is. And then once you realize what that why is, then make sure that you have something in your, as a visual, if you're visual, I'm visual, so I'm going to say something that visually represents that why. So, you know, for me, you know, why did I continue making 60 contacts a minimum every single day, even after I was doing, you know, hundreds of transactions? It's because what I wanted to do, after I peeled the onion all the way down to what I believe is the core, and surely I'm sure we could go even deeper than I imagine. It came down to, I just wanted to be a great example for my children. So what I did is I took a picture of my children and I hung it on my prospecting station. And the way this picture was hung, it was as if my kids were watching me. And I was asking myself, when I showed up to my prospecting station, which was a stand-up station, they would always be in my visual because I knew I was always in their visual. And I had to ask myself, am I being the person that I want them, or am I being the example that I want for them? So then I had a duty to do this, take action and do this work, because it was way beyond me. It was way beyond the buyer or the seller. It was about being an example. And I had to live up to that. And when I was not being the example, I could look at them and I'd say, okay, I'm not being the example. I need to snap out of this. So I think the simple answer, it's not necessarily that simple, is asking why multiple times. Like, take out a pad of paper, ask yourself, what's your goal? Ask yourself why, and do it 10 times. Ask why 10 deep, 10 degrees of why. Maybe that should be a conversation. 10 degrees of why, right? You know, that right there is a way that you can actually dig deep and figure out what's going on in your mind and what makes you tick.
I love it. I love it. And I'll tell you what really touched home for me is something that you said, and I think a lot of people should definitely do this, whether they are a parent or not. Because I remember when I was building, you know, my career, I was doing it as a single father, and you know, yeah, a lot of days I didn't want to wake up. A lot of days I didn't want to, you know, go to work, but I went to work and I didn't feel like prospecting and getting rejected and all that good stuff. But I had a picture of my son. Okay, and you know, for the people who've been following the show for a while have heard me talk about this before, and basically, for me, it was like this imaginary thing that I created, that my son is actually physically watching me. Yeah. And what do I want him to see right now? Do I want him to see a man who gives up, or do I want him to see a man who will do whatever it takes? And that right there, Greg, just lit the fire underneath me. It just got me to make my first contact, got me to you know, ask, you know, that one extra close, ask for the appointment more, make an extra contact, work an extra hour, because in my mind, he wasn't physically there, but he was spiritually there watching me.
Yeah. That's
And that made
interesting. We really share that in common. Because as you're talking, I mean, my kids to me were looking at me, you know, and it was, and how could I quit early? Because I knew I was going to tell them when they felt like quitting early, I was going to tell them to keep going.
Yeah.
But my kids and our kids, and this is probably for me and you, because it touches our why. But our kids are going to do what we do. They're not going to do what we say.
Yeah.
And I have to be an example of just relentless, you know, conviction to move forward, even when I'm bored, even when I don't feel like it. You know, I just got to keep going.
Yeah. All right. So I think we touched up, we did very good in speaking about the mindset and acquiring the mindset. And I love how you said, you know, the 10 why deep, you know, taking the why 10 deep. I think that is an exercise that I want every single listener of the show, everyone who's watching the video, to do that today. And I want you guys to like share with me and Greg, you know, via Facebook, via Messenger, via social media. Let us know, you know, what is your real true why? Because Greg, I think another thing that you and I share in common is we're people of contribution, and we love to cheer people on.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Because like you said earlier, you said, you know, you are the example, and not just to be a pretty poster, but an example for people to go out there and to duplicate what you've done. So I'd love to see people participate in that exercise here in the group, and, you know, via the podcast and all that good stuff. All right, so we touched up on mindset. Another thing I want to touch up on, which I'm a huge advocate of, is, you know, the art of influence. You know, your skill set. You know, your ability to connect with people. You know, your ability to get people to, you know, like you, trust you, feel good in your presence, and follow your lead. Because in real estate, we got to think of ourselves as leaders. People come to us so we can lead them through, you know, the process of, how do I own a home? How do I sell my home for top dollar? How do I achieve the American dream? And I know that, you know, you and I most likely have been trained by the same people on skill set and all that good stuff. Can you talk a little bit about skill set?
Yeah, especially the art of influence. Gosh, I haven't even heard that term in a long time. That's a little classic Matthew Ferry type of stuff.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. So, but on that, you know, the art of influence, I start thinking, okay, influence, communication, skills, communication. So let's now talk about communication. And because I think that is our skill, right? Like real estate is a conversation, you know, and so it's one's ability to have higher level conversations that tend to really win over the consumer. And you know, we talk about the skill of asking questions, and I do believe asking questions is really critical. But I think beyond asking questions is most critical, and where most people lose it, and it's called listening. You've got to be able to hear what the people don't say and communicate to them with the conversation that they're having in their head, but they haven't actually told you that they're having. So for instance, like, you know, we'll go real basic. You make a phone call and it's expired, or a FSBO or a cold call, whatever. You call somebody and you say, yeah, when do you plan on moving? And they say, we're not. Okay, so they said practically no. We're not. Well, they said a few things. First of all, what most real estate agents heard is they're not moving. What I heard is What did mean? Because, like, I know this is kind of maybe a little awkward, an example, but I think it's the damn best example I got. If you ask somebody if they're pregnant and then they say, no, versus no. See, like, they're both no's, right? They said the same thing, no, but you heard something totally different. And there are so many cues in communication. If you'll really listen, not only the words, their tonality, their pauses, their hesitations, that's the skill. I remember I was talking to one of my coaches, Tony DeCello, greatest coach I've ever had. And Tony, I said, Tony, I think I figured it out. I said, I think why my conversion ratio from contact to appointment is so good is I'm actually hearing what people are not saying. I'm addressing what I'm hearing, and people are glad that I'm actually talking about what they really want to talk about. See, we can practice the skills and the scripts and talking about the things, the like sentences, mastering the sentences that we know are going to happen at some point in the dialogue. But what we don't do is we don't practice enough on listening. And I'm not talking about just listen to, so you make sure that you hear everything they said. I'm talking about listening so you can hear what they're not saying. And that'll separate you from everybody.
I love it. I love it. And it's something I speak a lot about in my NLP training and my listings on demand training, is where I say, listening is the foundation to all your powers of influence. And you're talking about listening to what they're not saying, and in listening to what they're saying and not what they're saying combined, you're able to, one of the things you mentioned earlier, you said, hey, I'm a visual. Okay. Obviously, we got to speak to a visual person completely different than we do to a kinesthetic person or an auditory person. We got to speak differently to people who are moving away from pain and or moving towards pleasure, people who are internal and external. And once you're listening to that, then you could alter and shift your conversation, the words that are coming out of your mouth, to land perfectly in the way that they can process it, which eliminates confusion and makes it easy for them to make a decision. I'm sure you're aware of that too.
Yes, absolutely. As a matter of fact, something that's just reminded, my lead sheet, we all have these little lead sheets probably, I mean, most people now, they just type it in the computer. I still have a lead sheet, right? So on my lead sheet, I actually had internal and external. And I would actually, as I'm talking to them, I would check whether or not, so I might ask a question like, how are you going to know, or what's important to you, or I might ask them some questions, and then I would identify whether they were internal or external, and I'd actually circle that. So when I went into a presentation, I was actually practicing the presentation based on the type of personality that they were, or the way that they like to communicate or receive communication. So 100%, I believe in that. Significant.
Love it. That same exact thing in my qualifying sheet. I got the IE for internal, external.
Yeah.
I got the PL for pleasure or PA for pain.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I do all of that stuff, and I teach. For the majority of my clients, Greg, and I'm sure you can relate to this. I'm sure your ratios are great. I'd say every single one of my coaching clients, their conversion rates on the listing appointment to listing taken is approximately 87 to 90%.
Great.
And a lot of people think it's because they have a canned listing presentation. And my response is not that they have a canned listing presentation. It's that they have a process of connecting with people and speaking, in a way that, other people can relate to and really understand and all that good stuff. And
yeah,
it's totally in line with what you and I are speaking about. So let's talk about the listing presentation.
Yeah. Well, I'll start with canned presentations. Okay. So I think that when you're learning scripts, and usually canned and scripts all kind of come into they get merged into one conversation. When you're learning scripts, I believe that there's 3 phases of script mastery. There's memorization, and in the memorization stage or phase, that's where it's going to be canned. Okay. Whereas you're saying a script, hi, my name is Greg. Like all you're doing is you're reading words in a certain sequence, right? That's a canned presentation. And it's critical at some point in stage 1 to master the canned presentation, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. But once you've mastered the canned presentation, then you could go to phase 2. Phase 2 is the internalization phase. That's where, my name is Greg. That's memorization. Internalization is where you understand why you're saying things and asking certain things at a certain time. The old Mike Ferry script would have been, if somebody says, will you cut the commission? No. Any other questions? Well, no. Any other questions? When you read it, it sounds like the worst script possible. No. Any other questions? You can put some tonality and inflection to it. It makes it sound like terrible, right? But why was it no? Any other question? Why was it? The reason is because 50% of the time when somebody asks you to cut the commission, they were just asking a question. It really wasn't an objection. So let's not handle their question as if it was an objection, because if we do, we actually attract the objection. So let's just say no, any other questions, answer the question. And if it comes up a second time, then handle the objection. See, now that's internalizing the script. So now I have an understanding why I'm using that script. And now that I have an understanding, then I will add a little bit more inflection to it. It won't be so cold. So once you memorize and then you internalize, the third phase is kind of what I feel like you're referring to, is personalization. So you got memorization, internalization, and personalization. That's where you can practically forget the canned script, forget everything that you know about those scripts, and just be you. But you have built such a great foundation and an understanding of the real estate conversation and the dialogue that you can just be you and flourish in your personality, where we could all memorize and internalize the same script. But once we get to personalization phase, it doesn't sound like anybody's on script. It's just naturally flowing. So I believe when it comes to these listening presentations, we need to go through that process. And the best way to go through that process is through role playing and practicing. Get through that memorization, by role playing hours and hours and hours, so you can advance through these different stages or phases.
Terrific. How often should one be role playing, Greg? And somebody joins your team, somebody comes to work for your company. You're an advocate of role playing. How often do you want them to show up and do a role play, et cetera?
So if you're joining in our team and you want to, get on the phones and actually start making some calls, we require, before you can even make your first call, an outbound call, you have to actually demonstrate that you've already memorized all the scripts. So we have something we call script certification. So that's going to require role playing with somebody. I have a script mastery course where they have to write it, they have to speak it, they have to record it, they have to listen to it, and they have to repeat that for about 2 weeks. What we found out is when people actually will record themselves and then listen to their recording, the first time they do that, they're going to be like, God, I stink. This sounds terrible. But then they go back and write it again. They speak it again. They record it again and listen to it again. They're like, well, I guess it's not that bad. And then they repeat that process and they're like, well, gosh, I seem to be getting better. And then they repeat that process. Well, it's pretty good. See, what I feel like agents need to do is they need to role play and record and replay, because when they replay it, they will actually see every time they do it, they get a little bit better. And then that builds their confidence. And then as they start to notice, wow, I actually can see I'm getting a little bit better, then they become more motivated to continue that process. Now, once that process is gone and they're script certified, I believe somebody should be role playing a minimum of 30 minutes every single day. And a lot of people don't do that. But, if this is a game and if you want to reach mastery level, then you've got to do and emulate the things that other masters have done. And we can look in the sports field, arts fields, and look at all these great, athletes that are out there. These guys practice. I was on the tennis court with I was actually observing tennis practice with my 2 kids yesterday. And I was looking at the coach and I'm thinking, gosh, my kids are out here for 3 hours today. And then I'm like, gosh, they're out there for about 15 to 16 hours every week. And they only play a tournament every other week. And when they play a tournament, let's just say they had 4 matches, and those 4 matches are, let's say, an hour and a half long. So how long is that? That's 6 hours worth of actual competition. That's only 3 hours per week on average for competition, and they're spending 15 hours in practice. I'm like, if we could just act like our kids when it comes to like those little athletes, we'd be crushing this business. But we're in reverse, right? We're in reverse. Yeah. We're like, we want to perform more than we want to practice. We should be practicing more than we're performing.
Right. You play at the level that you practice.
Absolutely.
Yeah. One of the things is, I used to, I was business partners with Danny Morell. I don't know if you knew that or not. And,
No, I didn't know that. Yeah.
Right. And, one of the things that we did, across the board, like about 400 agents, every single morning, every single morning, the whole entire company would get together, whether in person or via online. And it was like almost mandatory, 30 minutes of script practice every single morning. And even, talking about script certification, I love that. I never heard of the term script certification, but I think that is so critical because if you, like you said, memorizing the script, that's the foundation. Okay. And everybody's got to have that foundation. And eventually, they get to internalize it and then personalize it. And that's where mastery really comes in. So I think everybody that's listening to this should begin by selecting, I'd say select one script right now and work on that script until you master it. And then select script number 2, script number 3, and then your listing presentation and your objection handlers and all that good stuff. Great. But anything else you want to say about, skills before we move on to the next topic or anything like that?
When I'll leave it like this. When you master your skills, objection handling and your scripts and whatnot, your skills, you're going to be disappointed because you're never going to actually have to use your skills. It's kind of like if you become like a 5th degree black belt, nobody picks a fight with you. Like, when you're just first trying to learn how to fight, you're probably getting into fights. Everybody will sign up to spar with you because they want to take a shot at you, right? But when you become a badass, nobody wants to fight you anymore. In other words, when you master your skills, you won't even get objections because your level of confidence will be so high, people will just trust that you're the right person for the job and they'll skip all the objection. Objection comes out when the consumer sniffs a lack of confidence.
You're so true. I love it. I love it that you say that because that's something that, a lot of people, when they sign up for coaching and they come into one of my programs, the first thing they want to do is how do I handle this objection? How do I handle that objection? And I'm like, look, that's the last thing that we are going to work on. What we need to work on right now is how do you become the kind of person who just eliminates objections before they even come up?
That's right.
Okay. And that's what we do. All right. So something that you talked about in the beginning of our conversation is processes. Okay. Systems, processes, systems. One thing I want to, let's see if we can get you to talk about this. I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, Greg, your numbers speak for themselves and you're a legend in this industry. I believe that the most important system of all systems is your past client and center of influence system. Can you talk about that? Do you agree? If there's a disagreement, please correct me. I'm coachable.
Well, I wouldn't say, I think it is a very important. I wouldn't say, I wouldn't speak it's the most important. I would say that it is very, very important. Now, so let's speak on it for a minute. Right now, I believe the importance of it is even growing beyond it's ever been because there's so much noise out there, right? So we need to really focus our centers of influence and our past clients. We've got to give them attention. I made this statement in a conversation that I had with someone else not long ago. Too many people in the industry have neglected their databases. And it's kind of like neglecting their relationship. We've had this relationship for a while with this database and we're taking it for granted. But now you've got so many other players in the mix, like the Zillows and the this and then that are penetrating those databases and they're loving on our databases more than we're loving on them. And all of a sudden the attention is being redirected away from us. So I do believe this past client and the centers of influence list is critical. We've got to make our databases fall in love with us all over again. If not, we're just going to lose one of the biggest assets. So I would say it's one of our biggest assets and we've got to pay attention to it. Now, it doesn't mean, we go and say, well, let me put them on some auto drip. Yes, they probably need to be nurtured. And you probably need to have a systematic approach and use automation. But you've got to make sure that the consumer receives your communication as if they're the only one receiving it. We've got to stop thinking that one size fits all communication works anymore. It doesn't. It only works if you want a lot of unsubscribes. So we've got to actually go ahead and really give these people some real value, pay attention. The only reason that I didn't say that I think it's the most important system is because I believe the most important system is to make sure that you're fishing for new business every single day. Like that's the one right now that people just seem to not be doing. Everyone's relying on a third party to actually distribute them or push business to them. They're thinking that this home valuation widget, or this company that does the social media, or this company that will call expireds for me, or this company that'll give me this, or, you know, everyone's looking for someone else to give us business. And at some point, you take your hand off of your own lead faucet and you become very vulnerable. And I think that's where most agents are right now. So I think the most important system that agents need to be focusing on right now is making sure that they have a system to self-generate new business. Now, through that process, they'll be adding to their centers of influence and that past client database simultaneously. So that's my thought on it.
Okay, I love the thought, you know, and I love how, you know, you reworded it completely different by saying it is the, you know, one of the most important assets, because in essence, everything that you're doing fishing for business, you know, all those people that you're going to generate are going to go where? They're going to go in that system. And if you don't got that system, then it's just like, you know, wham, bam, thank you, ma'am. And, you know, you're starting all over again every single year saying, where the heck do I get my deals from, et cetera. The nurturing and the loving the database, et cetera. Let me ask you, how often do you and or your team, your company communicate with the people from inside of your database, whether through automation or personalization?
Wow, gosh. So it's the one call every quarter still stands. That's kind of an old school, you know, thought, and one mailer, you know, every quarter, one call every quarter. That's kind of just like old school, right? But nowadays with technology, gosh, we're doing so much more. I mean, yes, we have the one quarterly call, but then we have an update going out, you know, say whatever community that they live in. We have a market update going on for that particular community. What solds have occurred, new listings, price reductions, and everything. Kind of like a CMA that goes out to the database. Each one is an individual CMA based on what community that they live in. That's going on once a month. Then they're going to get a list once a month of everything that is actually sold in that prior, you know, 30 days. So that'll be like kind of 2 weeks. And then the full market report comes in 2 weeks later. Then I'm actually doing a newsletter, and then we've got the call. So, I mean, if you think about that, I mean, there's at least 1, 2, 3 touches per month with the database, plus the quarterly call. Plus, I'm then going to upload the entire database as a custom audience into Facebook, and then I'm going to run Facebook and do market updates videos, and then have it only going to my database in their Facebook pages. So that's going to be going on every month. So I believe in a multi-channel approach. I'm going to hit them by the phone. I'm going to hit them in the mailbox. I'm going to hit them in their email box, and then I'm going to hit them on social media. So anytime they actually use this, I'm going to be there.
Omnipresence.
Yeah, omnipresence.
Omnipresence. I love it, love it, love it. Awesome. All right, so let's talk a little bit about fishing for new business. I mean, you said, you know,
I love to fish.
Yeah, yeah. When you started, you know, you were prospecting for your dad, et cetera.
Yeah.
And, you know, so obviously you were utilizing the phones.
Yeah, okay. And that's right. That's old school, right? I had two phones, right? The headset had two different, you know, phones, one on one ear and one on the other. Yeah.
Yeah. Are you doing that right now? Yeah. I got a guy I was working with out of Florida, and basically he's got 2 dialing systems, and he's using a double headset that way. Yeah. So you're just taking it to the next level that way. All right. So let's talk about that. You know, I mean, there's a lot of people that really want to do it. You know, Greg, let's talk a little bit first to the people that want to get on the phones, but just have a hard time getting on the phones and fishing for business. You know, why do you think that is, and how do you think they can overcome it? I'm sure, you know, when people come into your company, they probably are faced with that kind of challenge. How do you help them overcome that?
So I think when people have a fear of, they have a hard time overcoming it and going and making these calls. I really believe that in their mind, the way they would describe what they're doing is completely opposite of how somebody would describe it if they actually fell in love with the process. Okay, so the people that fall in love with it, like myself, I felt like it was my duty. I was serving the consumer and not selling the consumer. So I think those that hate it, what they hate about it is, I don't want to be a salesman. I don't want to sell to the consumer. Well, I never thought I was selling anything. I thought I was serving the community, not selling the community. So I could imagine that if I felt like I was selling the community, I probably would have resisted the phones also, because I don't want to be pushy salesperson or whatever. I don't want to be manipulative. I don't want to be, people to feel like I'm desperate or have canned presentations. I would say all those things too. But when it clicked on me that I'm actually serving the community, then it's like, now it becomes my duty. And so how can I say, what's the difference? Well, the difference is I wouldn't have commission breath. I was never trying to talk somebody into selling. I was just trying to identify those that were already talking about selling and then convince them through my communication that I was the best person for the job. So I wasn't trying to create deals. I was trying to identify opportunities and then make sure that I presented myself to them and gave them an option, and I was an option to them. So versus somebody else thinking, well, I don't want to make these calls, and as if they're trying to sell people on listing with them, or they're trying to sell people and convince them that they should move. No, I'm okay if they're not wanting to move. If they're no, I'm not moving, then fantastic, because I'm going to serve them by getting them into my database. But I think that's the thing, is people really feel like they're just being slimy salespeople. And that is nothing more than a perception. When they change that perception, when they change that story that they're telling about that activity, then they will experience that activity differently. They just got to change the story about that doing.
I love it. I love it. So if we were to give everyone an exercise right now, what would the exercise be? Like, here's what I want you to do we can just say, change the story, write a new story. I would say something along the line of like literally, writing a sentence or a paragraph or, a full page talking about like, just inventing this thing of like, hey, just wanted to write myself a quick letter and share with myself the experience of what it's like of me being on the phones over the course of the last 1 month, 2 months, 3 months. It was totally opposite of what I thought it was going to be. And this is something like that. What do you think?
So one of the things that I've done within my group is I've asked everybody to write a full paragraph of like, why do you matter? Now I'm talking about within the transaction. Okay. Not in life. That'd be a book, not a paragraph. Why do you matter to the transaction? And you better not tell me I'm honest and I communicate well.
Yeah.
Because that is a commodity. That's a given. Like, that's like a kid saying, hey, can I have some extra money because I made my bed today? No, you can have a butt whipping if you don't make your bed today. But if you do make your bed today, we just are like meeting minimum standards, right? So like honesty and I follow up, that can't be your value. That's an expectation that is had by all consumers amongst all of us. What is the value beyond the natural expectations of the consumer? And when and listen, that's not easy, because I just took out the two things that everyone's going to put down. Well, I'm honest and trustworthy, and you can rely on me. I'm organized and good communication. Not allowed to use any of that. Now what the hell are you going to say? And so it'll take a little bit of time to figure that out. But dig deep and write that paragraph. Why do you matter to the transaction? And then now all of a sudden you'll see why you matter. You'll see that the value of your serving them. You'll see that what you write down is your form of service. You won't write down anything about selling, but what it'll do is going to connect you with why you matter. And then once you really get inspired, when you look at the reasons why you matter to the transaction, you're more likely to go chase those transactions because you actually are significant to the transaction. You just are disconnected with it. You just haven't identified it. But I can assure you, anyone listening, they're significant. They matter. You just haven't connected the dots yet. So I'd tell them to write that paragraph.
I love it. And maybe they can go 5 deep or 10 deep on the why here. Like, why does this matter?
Yeah.
Why does that matter? Why does that matter? So
Yeah.
I think another thing that, we should give all our audience, I think every single person should definitely participate in that exercise. And I'd love to really read what people come up with so I can better support them and hold them accountable, to making that become a reality. So please, if you're listening to this or watching this, share it with me and Greg, share it with the world, because when you let the world know what it is that you're up to, the world's going to hold you accountable to become just that as well.
Yeah, awesome. That's a big deal. Big deal. I'd love to see that.
Love it. That's an excellent exercise. All right. So Greg, here's a different kind of question. And the question is there a question that I probably should have asked you by now that I did not ask you that I should ask you?
That's a good one. We did talk about a lot, and and I kind of think we went a little bit deep on some of those subjects.
Yeah.
I can't think of a question. Maybe I can just have a little bit more dialogue with you on distraction. That I think that there's a lot of distraction, and in our industry, and like, why are people not role playing as much as they should? Distraction. Why are people not calling as much as they should? Distraction. Why are people like hiring all these services and it doesn't seem to work? Distraction. I just want you to understand this. Distraction is something that's been designed to get a piece of our income. It's like the things that are distracting you come with they've got their hand extended saying, pay me. It's interesting. You're paying all these people to distract you. And when you're paying them to distract you, what you don't realize is you're forming some sort of addiction, meaning you're becoming dependent on people that want to distract you, and they're actually taking your money while they're distracting you and leaving you in a situation where you don't even control your lead flow anymore. And now guess what they're doing? They're increasing the price of the lead. And they can get away with it because we're dependent, which is a sure sign of an addiction. What I would just pray that people would do is take what I just said and say, you know what, I'm not anti-vendors and third-party services. I use them, but it represents maybe 15% of our production, not 85%. Take control of your business. But in order to take control of your business, you got to get up and follow your process. I think that's the thing. Distraction, people are complaining about distraction, but you got to understand the same people that are complaining about distraction are actually paying somebody to distract them.
Yeah.
And it's all by design to take the agents away from self-generation. Because if we stop self-generating, then that means we have to pay somebody else to generate for us. That's where we're being fools.
Yeah. So basically, we got to take responsibility. Okay. And, we got to change our stories. And, I think, one of the big things that's come to my mind is a quote that I shared yesterday online. And it is, it's going to like wrap up pretty much everything that you and I just talked about in a sentence. And it's like, if you want to go for it, you got to grow for it. Okay.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, this whole entire thing is nothing more than a vehicle to get us from where we at to the wealth that we want, to the relationships that we want, to the abundance that we want. But we drive the vehicle. So, we got to work more on ourselves than we do on all parts of the business, because the more equipped you are with tools and strategies and, mindset, hacks or whatever you want to call them, I guess some people will say the luckier you become. It's not luck.
Yeah. Well, we got to put ourselves in position to luck out.
Absolutely.
You know, I've ended up at the right place at the right time, but remember, I drove to that place. You know, I drove to the place not knowing I was going to luck out, but I am the one that got in the car and drove to the place, and then I lucked out. So, you know, if you just constantly focus on putting yourself in a position to win, and you're going to win.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I agree with you. All right. So I know we've taken up a lot of your time. Let me just ask you one or two more quick questions real quickly. I'm a big advocate on reading, and I personally read approximately, I'd say, my goal is to read a book a week. I probably read a book like every 10 days.
Wow.
What's one book that you've read sometime in the last 25 years, new or old, that had an impact on you that you would like to, get other people to read it?
You know, my favorite book is by the late Chet Holmes called, The Ultimate Sales Machine. Yep. Gosh, it was fantastic. And I read that years and years ago. And I recently reread a few of the important chapters to me. And one of them was on building databases. It's kind of like how I got into building databases really early on, years and years ago. But that's the one that comes to my mind. And besides that, what I'm doing right now is I'm just so into the podcast. I'm listening to podcasts. I think the one, How I Built This, podcasts where they talk about these companies like Starbucks or Spanx or Lululemon, and they get the founders of those companies on there and talk about all the struggles that they went through and the luck that they had and the near bankruptcy or bankruptcy that they went through to finally get to a point where their business broke through. And it's like, man, every story, there's this one thing that you've probably heard. I know Matthew Ferry is where I heard it. The breakdowns are your access to breakthroughs. Okay. But only if you stick in it, right? And don't quit. Because so many people quit at the breakdown.
Yeah.
But it's like breakdown, don't quit, keep going, and you'll break through. So I love that one podcast because it's these companies that we look at and say, gosh, they've just wow, they invented this great thing. They're the best companies in the world. And we realize that they barely even launched.
Yeah.
And the adversity that they had to overcome was amazing. And I feel like that's where we are in our business. We're constantly dealing with that. Breakdowns are the access to break through, but you only gain access if you don't quit.
Absolutely. Love it. Love it. Love it. All right, Greg. So I know there's a lot of people out there that either want to refer your business or want to connect with you. How can people, connect with you, et cetera?
The best way, obviously everything's on the internet, but I believe the best way to connect with me is just find me on Facebook, Greg Harrelson, hit the message button, send me a message. It's most convenient for you and it's most convenient for me. If you just message me, and I'm really good about answering questions and whatnot. I enjoy, contributing, develop and helping people, reach new levels. So feel free to reach out through Facebook Messenger.
Awesome. Love it. Any final thoughts or anything you want to say to be complete?
I think I'm complete, man. I think we covered some really cool stuff on this call.
I think so too. I just want to say, I definitely want people to, watch you. I began, at the beginning of the show by talking about how, even though this is our real first conversation,
yeah.
But even without having to have a physical conversation, we in essence had a conversation, an invisible conversation, by you saying something 20 some years ago that had an impact on me that still resonates with me up until this day. And then, I want people to really connect with more people online. Okay. I'm a big advocate of this, online, podcast. You don't need to know someone physically to number one, contribute to them, and number two, to, learn from them. So I just want to say thank you for playing a big role in who I've become without you even knowing it. I appreciate that. And I'm going to, thank you on the behalf of the audience of the show for making the time to contribute to them. And there will be a lot of other Shadis and a lot of other people out there who will thank you in the near future. So I appreciate you, brother.
Yeah, well, thank you for saying that, because that makes everything I do well worth it.
Yeah, that, at the end of the day, that's what it's all about.
Yes,
I appreciate you, man.